Okay, so good morning and thank you for coming for this industry session. The title being From Space to Earth, Challenges and Opportunities. I know that it's a little bit early, but we said that we will start at 8:30 sharp, and I think that it's 8:37, so I propose that we start. So, once again, as every year, I am delighted to welcome you to this panel that we organized on behalf of the IAF Industry Relations Committee. And as I said today, it is dedicated to the following issue: From Space to Earth, Challenges and Opportunities. The plenary session will be managed by my friend Mr. Virendra Jha from Canadian Space Agency, who will act as the moderator, and the conclusion remarks will be drawn by Mr. John Elbon from Boeing. I am very pleased this morning to welcome our distinguished panelists from both governmental and industrial sides to tackle with our today's subject, taking into account the maturity of space solutions to solve concrete and day-to-day issues for human collectivities. I think that this topic is very relevant when I compare it to the discussions which have been held yesterday. So, first, this morning I think that we should try to understand and assess how expectations from the general public shaped in policies, and in particular in space policies, can be met by industrial players, because sometimes it is not so obvious. Second, I think that it will be as well quite important to hear from those later whether the requirements from governmental bodies make sense and what their suggestions are to enhance space solutions as key enablers for policy decision makers. I should add that holding this discussion here in Cape Town in South Africa, with the participation of top managers for both several African space agencies and major space industrial and services companies, is a very highlighting occasion. Opportunities and challenges regarding utilization of space tools are here in Africa, the same as in the rest of the world, while talking about the digital divide, knowledge production, e-skills, sustainable development, climate change, and other issues to be addressed. Perhaps also that the specificity may be the urgency and the scale of those issues decision makers have to cope with. And this is why, in this panel, with so distinguished members, it is of the greatest interest, first, to have an outlook of agencies' expectations concerning the capacity of industry and services providers to satisfy the needs of general policies. And second, and in my opinion, it's probably the most important, to benefit from proposals from our industrial panelists in terms of capacities, technologies, and competitiveness to address these challenges and opportunities. So this is what I wanted to say as an introduction. Last year we have been very successful for this day, and I am sure that today with these panelists it will be also the case, and so this is my pleasure to leave the floor to my friend Mr. Virendra Jha. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Legal, for introducing the plenary and the members and the subject. I'll start with a few questions, but before I go to the question, let me paint a vision for the future for all the African farms and maybe all the farms of the world. It's a future where all the farms are green, farmers are sitting and having coffee in their room, their farms are being automatically controlled, automatically irrigated, because there is a satellite passing overhead, which is a hyperspectral satellite measuring nitrogen content. There's another satellite passing overhead, which is measuring soil moisture. And there is communication satellite, which is synthesizing all the information, and the farms are being automatically irrigated. And the farmer is sitting in his living room, having coffee, using internet to sell his crop, where his children are in the other room having tele-education, and his wife is consulting a doctor through the telemedicine. So this is a utopian concept today, but this is where the future is. And today we have 3 space agency leaders here from Africa, and they all have their vision, and they're charting the path towards this future. So my first question is going to be aimed at the 3 African space agency leaders, Mr. Mohammed, Mr. Eften, and Mr. Malinga. My first question is, it's a 2-part question. What are your national policy objectives, and what are your expectations from industry to satisfy them? And second part of my question is, in order to make full use of satellite communications and Earth observations data and services, what cooperation opportunities you expect from non-African industries? So since this is the home, I'll ask Mr. Malinga to start the discussion.
Okay, in terms of our country, our expectations from our industry is informed by the priorities that the country has. The first one being to use space science and technology to benefit society, and we've identified Earth observation as one vehicle of doing that, for planning, for resource management, disaster management, and those kind of applications. But we fully realize that as an agency, we don't have the capacity, and in some instances, even the capability to do certain things. And so we want to work with our industry in terms of providing applications which are customized to meet the needs of different requirements from different clients. Currently, we have in excess of 100 companies or consultancies in GIS, as an example. They are doing a great job, and they're extending our reach to meet the needs that are out there. And they are also meeting another need for our country. Our country has a very high unemployment rate, 25%. And when you look at the numbers that I've given you of about 100 or so companies that are out there, largely they're probably one-man company, in some instances 2. But on the average, essentially they're employing more people than SANSA is employing at the moment. And so we see those companies as creating jobs, and we need to work with them in stimulating that and making sure that they grow and do what they need to do. There are areas where we need to clarify, especially when they provide services to the public sector, can we leverage procurement of the data in a better way? In some instances, they sell the same image to different stakeholders twice. Whereas, we have single licenses for multiple users. And so those are the things that we need to clear. That's one area. And then another one is that of the number of other applications which we think they lend themselves to be largely commercially driven, and we don't see ourselves playing in that space. Navigation, we think we could lay the basic infrastructure required for augmentation, but then I think that's as far as we should go. In terms of other companies using the infrastructure that we've laid down, I think that should happen so that they grow the industry. Communication is another one which lends itself to be, commercially driven, and not unless we are trying to provide communication for the state, as it was indicated by communications yesterday. I don't think we should play in that space in a big way. So those are the areas. And then another one where we want to focus on, where we think we probably play a direct role, is in space systems, developing our satellites. We believe our government is looking at probably holding a stake in one of our companies. That has not been finalized, but that's the current thinking. However, we are of the opinion that, in as much as there could be a primary contractor that's responsible for that business, we believe that there should be cooperation with other entities. There are other industries that are in the country, aerospace, and other sectors, and we are toying around the idea of, South Africa Incorporated. We believe that by bringing together our resources from different industries, we'll be able to achieve what we need to achieve faster and more efficiently. Those are the things. And then in terms of, the second question was, what are we looking to, gain from non-African companies? We want to work with those companies. We've been doing it in terms of imaging. We get images from different satellites around the globe. We want to continue to do that. The challenge there is how we contract in acquiring those images. Sometimes the contracting arrangements are not favorable to us in terms of our regional objectives. I spoke about single license, multiple user arrangements, but that's confined to our country. In the SADC region, which is the region around the South African Development Community, South Africa is the only country that has a very strong space program. And I think it's a duty and a responsibility for us as a country to try and reach out to our neighbors. And so we would like to have a situation whereby the licensing, allows us to some extent to reach out to those countries and meet their needs. They are in our field of view, and we can assist them, but are constrained by the licensing agreements. Those are the kind of things that we need as we go forward. We have broadband now. We can change the way we do things. In the past, we were constrained in terms of downloading the data and transmitting it to you. That is changing now. We have redundancy on the West Coast as well as the East Coast in terms of broadband. And so we can download your data and transmit it back to you. And so we can change the model of doing business going forward. That's what we have to offer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Melinga. I'd like to follow with Mr. Iften. Same question. If you want me, I can repeat it, but if not, then please go ahead.
Thank you. Our expectation from the industry to satisfy the national space policy objectives are the emergence of a partnership based on training, know-how transfer in technology and space applications, and the development of national industrial sectors promoting a progressive development of competencies in accordance with United Nations resolution in terms of peaceful use of the water space at the service of sustainable development and well-being. For the second question, regarding the Algerian Space Agency, we prefer partnerships along with training and know-how transfer in order to encourage the emergence of national, regional, and African capacities. Also, in terms of Earth observation, the development of multilateral projects in terms of design, conception, utilization, and exploitation of space system, space segment, device images. To the installation in Algeria by our partner industrial units facilitating the transfer of know-how in design, sizing, and integration of payloads or realization of space platform. In terms of telecommunication, the transfer of know-how for the maintenance in operational condition of the space segment and the training operation and the ground operating equipment. For the third question, type of development expected, the gradual establishment of an industrial environment that will enable in medium and long term to ensure effective mastery of space technologies, in addition to the exploitation of the next satellite development center, CDS, at Oran, second city in Algeria, in the service of social and economic development of the country and the region. The involvement of performant industrial units in the areas of mechanic, electronics, telecommunication, information technology, solar energy, and the non-destructive testing in the mastery of segments related to space technology. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stan. Now I'll request Mr. Mohammed of Nigerian Space Agency to describe their policies and objectives and expectations.
Mr. Chair, thank you very much for this opportunity. The space policy in Nigeria identifies the fact that space technology shall be used as part of the overall strategy for the development of various sectors in Nigeria and bringing good quality life to the Nigerian people. In the light of that, the government of Nigeria approved a 25-year roadmap for the implementation of space program. And the roadmap has identified clearly and precisely what we need to do, the infrastructure we need to put in place between the agency and the industry, academia, to enable it to work for the country. In that light, what we expect from the industries, for example, the roadmap is designed that at the beginning we work along with our partners in the design and building of satellites, and later it is meant to increase local competencies and in a manner that they can eventually begin to do it themselves. That has been demonstrated in part of our activities. In 2003, the Earth observation satellite, along with Satellite Technology Limited, were done along with our engineers through training. In that light, the latest one, SAT-2 and SAT-X, just launched, took cognizance of the fact that Nigerian engineers had to be given the opportunity to design and build satellites, which we did in SAT-X with the supervision of SSTL. In that light, subsequent, we expect that our assembly integration testing and design center would have been fully developed by the year 2025, that some of the satellites can be built back home in Nigeria, and at the end of the 25-year roadmap, commercialization and our industries should have been fully matured. At the moment, the policy has taken care of the fact that high-tech industries in Nigeria are still very weak, and they need to be given time, given encouragement to enable them grow. In terms of Earth observation satellite, yes, our policy has sufficiently taken care of that through our 25-year roadmap, and we have been making this available, and we expect that these satellites are ready, and we need to work for the people through processing of the data and providing the necessary information to guide people guide the local people, providing local maps for farmers, guiding them on what to do, how to produce crops, how to monitor environment, and do other things. We are concerned with that, and we are busy popularizing this technology as a reliable technology over the conventional ones they are used to. In terms of telecommunications, yes, in 2007, along with our partner in China, China Great Walls, we launched a satellite, a communication satellite, which worked for about 18 months. Unfortunately, it had to be deorbited because it had problems. We're thinking of launching back in December 2011. And the intention is, we believe that with a population of over 150 million people, we have enough market at home that even if we're able to take 50% of that market, it will go a long way in working for the Nigerian people. Currently, over $1 billion capital flight happens from Nigeria every year because of services, hiring of transponders for other services in the country, be it television, GSM, and other services to Nigeria. And we believe that even if we are able to reduce it by 50% in the next 10 years, such monies can be used locally to provide jobs, create wealth, create social stability, and the rest of them. In terms of what we think of non-African partnership, we believe that with the implementation of this 25-year roadmap, it has taken care of our relationship with our international partners, and that has been demonstrated with the volume of work we have done with Sorry Satellite Technology Limited of the United Kingdom, and also our partners from China. And we also believe that the focus is on Africa. Some private strength already exists in South Africa, and we are looking at how we can collaborate. And the first few things we have done with South Africa through in telecommunications and so on have been very successful. And we believe that we can collaborate together, we can extend to the next level in high technology development, particularly in satellite development. And we also expect that some of these companies in South Africa should also have a footprint in Nigeria so that Nigerians can buy into it, so that it becomes truly an African affair. We have our hands and our legs in it, and we're part of the decision, and we can begin to move together. And in that light, we believe that the technology will be domesticated and it can work for our people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mohammed. We have on the panel Mr. Albon, who is Vice President of Boeing, and he has kindly agreed to synthesize this African leaders' presentation, and then we move on to the industry side.
Is this on? Yes. Well, let's see here. First of all, thanks for starting us out with that vision. I think that's important in all aspects of space, that we create some vision for where we're going. So the image of the automated farms, I think, was powerful and set us up here. I heard a lot in here about relationships between government and industry, and how it's important that there's a collaboration there, government playing its part, industry playing its part. And I'd suggest that for us to be efficient, we have to make sure that that relationship is working well, and that we don't have overlap, underlap, so that we are not getting the best use of our resources. So a lot of discussion through that. Certainly a lot of discussion about the benefits and objectives of what to be done in space, communications, data, monitoring crops and the environment. So lots of examples in the discussion of how space can benefit everyday life on Earth. And certainly that's important. And then the final thing I took away from there was a lot of discussion about how technology development fueled jobs, helps stimulate the economy, and it's important that we don't lose sight of that, how an investment in space creates jobs, stimulates education, and grows economies of our countries. So I thought a lot of good, rich examples of that in that discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Albon. So as we see, there's a vision laid out by African Space Agency leaders. The needs are laid out, challenges are laid out. So now I'll request our industry panelists to respond to some of those things. After listening to these policy objectives, my question is what opportunities and challenges you see in supplying space-based hardware and services and cooperating and meeting some of these needs. So I'll start from Mr. McNamara, who is already doing very good work in Africa in terms of providing communications-based services. And so I'd like him to add on to this.
Thank you. Again, thank you very much for inviting us to come and share our views in this very important conference. There are 4 points I will share with you very quickly. But just as a way of background is that Africa is a very big market in terms of space services are concerned. This is clearly demonstrated by the fact that all global players have some form of activity in Africa in some form or the other, whether through space segment or whether for communications or for mineral resource, oil and gas exploration. So there is an activity of space in the continent. And I think a lot of people do realize returns in the investment that they put in space in the African continent. I think critical to us is that, African players, both on the government side and private sector, we need to find a way to work together and come up with very clear business models, long-term sustainable business models. So the 4 items I'm just going to share with you sort of underpin that. 1, Africa is a growing market in terms of space products and services. And with about 30 million square kilometer in size and about 1 billion people with a GDP of 1.8 trillion. Therefore, there is a market here. You can talk about any application, whether it's communications, Earth observation, research, any space application. There is a market in the African continent. So that's point number 1. Point number 2 is that no entity can work alone to be able to be successful here, whether you are a government institution in the form of an agency or private company. So we really need to find a working business model between agencies that are involved in space and private companies. So that partnership is what will really make us successful in what we do. Because of clearly, we all know that nobody has endless money. Everybody is struggling to get budgets, or investments are not as, what people would wish to be. Thirdly, we need to invest in human capital, that is investing in people. People will understand space applications and also understanding business models of space. How do you create a sustainable space business today, whether it's a government institution or private sector? 4th and the last one is global partnership. We need to partner with other institutions in other parts of the world if we want to succeed. Again, based on the fact that nobody has unlimited resources. The issue today, given where the world is today because of, the cyclic nature of crisis that we find ourselves in as the world. As an industry, we need to try and find a smarter way to be able to continue to sustain this industry going forward. So lastly, for me, basically, is to say that there is an opportunity in Africa, I think. Given the fact that, if I talk about one application in communications, there are more than 600 million mobile phones today. The next 500 million mobile phones will be in rural areas, and they will be there before 2020. And the backhaul for this will be satellite. the next 500 million or 600 million that will be in rural. You can only use satellite to backhaul that. And therefore there is an opportunity for business, there's an opportunity for space agencies to collaborate to address this problem for both commercial and developmental point of view. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now move on to the other industry players here, and I'll request Mr. Yukama from Japan to give his views.
Good morning. Okay. Good morning. Thank you this time to invite me to this panel. And I'd like to use some charts to answering questions.
Could you please display the slides?
Yeah. This time I made some charts to answering chairman's questions. The problem is the panelists cannot see the chart. Okay, next page, please. Next page, please. Okay. Okay, there are several charts. There are many contributions field in the field of communication satellite areas, but today I'd like to mention about Earth observation area and navigation area. First, I mentioned about Earth observation area. There was a large earthquake in this March in Japan, and we Japanese are very appreciate for a kind support from many peoples, from many countries. And in this earthquake, it was revealed that the magnitude is about 9, and there are big tsunami, most highest tsunami is about 30 meters. And after this earthquake, most important thing is to get information about the damage of earthquake as fast as possible. Satellite image is most powerful tool for this purpose. Please look at both pictures. This is a picture of before and after earthquake. We can get very efficient and quickly what area is damaged by these two satellite images. Please going to next page. And from this experience, we found that most important characteristics for Earth observation regarding surface monitoring is wide coverage and high resolution. This is a sample image of ALOS satellite of Japan. ALOS is an advanced land observation satellite. This has this wide range and high resolution capability. We can get optical image as shown here in a very long areas, wide areas. And we can get surface movement of earthquake areas by processing synthetic aperture radar as shown here for the very wide coverage areas. Please going to next page. And following satellite of this ALOS, ALOS-2 satellite is now under development by JAXA, and ALOS-3 optical satellite is under planning. These satellites have improved wide coverage and high resolution capability, and I think this is very useful capability for these African countries. Please going to next page. This is an image of the cooperation between both countries. By using this wide coverage and high resolution capabilities, we think that we can contribute it to African countries through data sharing and capability building areas. This is our contribution image. Okay, next I move to navigation areas, to next page. We launched the first navigation satellite, QZS coordinate satellite, last September. This is a regional navigation satellite system that covers Japan and Asia Pacific areas. This satellite has an interesting orbit as shown in the right figures. It flies an 8-letter orbit. And this satellite has 3 functions. One is increasing capability and availability of GPS. And second is enhanced GPS performance. And third is a short message. I briefly explained these 3 functions. Please going to next page. In the center of the city or in the forest, a GPS signal is often cannot be always available. QZS flies 8-letter orbit and stays around TNS for a long time, and sending a GPS-compatible signal. That means we can increase the GPS capability for a long time. And second function is enhance GPS performance. QZS also send information to compensate GPS signals, GPS navigation errors. There are two signals. One is L1 safe, and the other is REX. If we use one signal L1 safe, we can get sub-meter accuracy. And if we use a REX signal, we can get a centimeter accuracy for areas of this satellite coverage. Please going to the next page. It's a third function. It is also planning to implement this kind of short message function to following QZS, reflecting the experience of disaster. This function is used in the case of disasters. One can use a mobile phone to get a message from the center. We can send some small short message via this navigation satellite to centers. For example, people can send that we are safe, or how about the families? Such a kind of message can be exchanged during this kind of system. We are now planning to implement this one. Okay, please going to our final pages. This is a summarization. As I mentioned, AROS 2 and 3 has a wide coverage and high resolution capability. For this reason, AROS 2 and 3 will be applicable for map generation, disaster monitoring, ship monitoring, and for many other fields in the African countries. And QZS-like navigation system, I think we will apply for high accuracy navigation applications, such as map generation and automatic agriculture, automatic constructions. And the short message, I think it's also very useful in the case of emergency and disasters. By using these space capabilities, we Japanese would like to contribute to space utilization of African countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Koyama, for describing your satellites and how the data can be used for various services, and hopefully through these discussions this will be available to all the African countries as well. Now I'll request Mr. Shene from Thales Alenia to describe his views.
Thank you, Chairman. I have also a vision like Virendra. I think in some years from now, we will land plane in Africa without pilot, or the pilot is sleeping, as usual. So, and that will be done with the extension of the system of navigation of EGNOS in Europe that will put for Africa, the SBAS system. And that's a way that we could use the system of navigation. Based on GPS, based also on Galileo, you have extension system where you could have a very precise system that will be useful for air traffic management, air traffic control, and also for the system in the airport. So it's a vision for a long term, but we could just in a few years from now start the system in the northern part of the African continent. It's quite simple because it's, let's say, we use the EGNOS, the European coverage extension. In this region, we have some one station, one RIM station. We could extend to have some more, and we will have a coverage of the South Africa. In the middle, it's more difficult because we have some technical problem, and we need to wait a little bit. Some technical problem due to the ionosphere. So that's okay, but definitely, I think it's a vision that we could share. It's very, I will not say very simple. Use what exists, try to improve, and we will do something. So that's the first step. our company has been involved in a lot of activities with African continent for Puma and Amazed mainly, that has been supported by the European Commission and also EUMETSAT, and we have developed this kind of activities. Today we have more than 150 station, receiving station terminals, receiving the meteorological data, doing some forecasting, and if you have some very good forecast and weather forecast for the air traffic control, is mainly due to the Puma system. So it's something that with Amazed, who is more dedicated for water management, we are trying to improve, and we are in the view to create something like a GMES for Africa, and I like this opportunity to concur with my colleague. It will be a long-term plan. We need first of all to develop for all the stakeholders the idea that space could be useful. In all the country, sometimes you discover that the head of the government doesn't know anything about space. And first of all, you need to involve these people to understand that space could be useful for everybody and for all the people. So that's the first step. In the second step, and yesterday the minister has said that for a satellite there is no border. In fact, there is no border for a satellite, and we will have some GMES satellite for Europe. We could use this kind of satellite and the data to develop the system for Africa, and that's part of things we are doing with the European Commission also. So that's, let's say, the things that will go. At the same time, some agencies will develop their own satellite, and that will raise also the awareness of all the people. So it's a growing interest. It's a way to grow the system for everybody. Regarding telecommunication, we are in a more mature market, definitely, and we know that for telecommunication there are opportunities. You remember we have launched the RASCOM satellite a few years ago. Okay, today we need to restart the RASCOM system due to the problem in Libya, but the system will restart. And the RASCOM system, the idea of the RASCOM system was not only to give capacity, to lease capacity, but also to offer services, and to offer a set of services for the people. Tomorrow, there will be opportunity to bridge the digital divide using the satellite, and I think Africa, as a very large country, a real opportunity to do it through satellite. So that's the main option that we see for tomorrow.
Thank you, Mr. Chenet. And you rightly pointed out it's not always easy for agencies to sell space and get the resources. So before it was easier because space had this aura, and now unless we sell the real usage, it's difficult to get resources. And secondly, you rightly pointed out that satellites do not know any boundaries. It's the boundaries on ground which prevent full utilization on Earth, so we need to work on that issue. Now I'll request Mr. John Horsby from MDA. MDA has been doing very good work in applications of Earth observation all through the world, so I'll ask him to give his views.
Thank you, Virender. Just by way of introduction, yes, MDA, we're involved obviously in space for many years. Everything from robotics to building Earth observing satellites, telecommunications satellites. But really, I just want to, in context of the comment I'm going to make, really is focus largely on Earth observation and utilization, which I think is certainly where we've been most strongly involved in Africa here. And so really my comments are focused there. As I think it was already mentioned that Africa is 30 million square kilometers. It's the second largest continent on Earth. There's something like 1 billion people. There's 26,000 kilometers of coastline. Huge kind of biological diversity from both north and south of the equator. So it's quite an extraordinary continent, and therefore, represents certainly opportunities for space-related applications in many different areas. In kind of addressing, I think, the initial question, which was in response to the agency's comments here, and what is, say, the expectation from the industry. Certainly, as I think everybody here can attest, this business is very international in scope, and therefore having the agencies basically encourage collaboration in space. Certainly you see it happening amongst the countries here in Africa, but also internationally is key as well in terms of developing the utilization in general. I think more specifically the agencies, and this is a bit from experience in Canada as well, is for the space agencies to be able to ensure that the other ministries within the government, agriculture has been used as an example here, certainly gain and begin to adopt, in this case I'll talk about Earth observation technology and fulfilling their mandates, because it's very key ultimately here to get these operational users in place. We've already we've had a partnership here in South Africa for some time with SANSA on RadarSat. That's certainly been a big focus for us, bringing radar technology for a number of applications. I suppose where we've had most activity has been certainly in the mining area, looking at land deformation, mapping in general from a number of different countries, producing elevation models, which ultimately provide a base from which a lot of geospatial information ultimately can be built and applied for many different problems. So we continue, certainly from our business standpoint, it's absolutely essential to have this collaborative partnership approach, and we find, I think that certainly from the agencies in Africa here seem to have that focus. But also on the industrial side, we are working with a number of companies here in terms of developing the markets. It's a very long way from Vancouver to Cape Town, I can tell you that. The number of hours on the plane, so there's a real need, practical need really, in terms of doing the business to work with the local industry here to develop the business and bring, in a sense, the expertise that we can bring to apply to Africa as a whole.
Thank you, Mr. Hornsby. We can proceed with more questions, but in the meantime, I'd like the audience members to think if they have any questions. There are people with microphone in the audience. So if you have any question, please raise your hand and we can open the questions. In the meantime, I'll continue here, and if I see any hand up, I'll ask the audience members to. Okay, go ahead.
Just ask for clarification about Japan navigation and satellite. There's one thing, a special receiver or cannot use a GPS compatible, and also for SMS. With ordinary cell phone do.
Could you use the microphone? Maybe some people cannot hear.
I just want to. Is it okay?
Yeah.
Just want to seek some clarification about the Japan's navigation and satellite. Would the receiver be would we a special receiver, or can we use the ordinary GPS receiver to receive the? And also for SMS, can one use ordinary cell phone, or does one need a special cell phone?
Okay, to the first questions, QZS was launched last year, and at present it was demonstration phases. That means we can use the receivers used for demonstration. But after demonstration, we'd like to it was clarified interface and open to many manufacturers to manufacture such a kind of GPS receivers. And to your second question, short message function is now planning to implement to next QZS series. And last Friday, Japanese government decided to establish QZS as a Japanese navigation infrastructures. That means this kind of development, including short message and high accuracy navigation, will be actually realized as a national infrastructure of Japan. And at last month, there is ICG in Tokyo. ICG is an international congress of GNSS. And in this meeting, it was decided to establish a new working group for applications, including short message, high accuracy navigations. That means I think this kind of function will be make some standardization and will extend it to the worldwide use in near future. That is my opinions.
Okay.
Is this?
Okay, please go ahead.
I have a question. I apologize at the outset for addressing Dr. Malinga. However, I see two contrasting scenarios. One, in Japan, we have an aging population. So with an aging population, technology is applicable, robotics, automated wheelchairs, etc. That seems to be the general trend in the advanced industrialized countries of North America and Europe. Now, let's contrast the population situation in Africa. Yesterday, I was privileged to visit a high school or some primary school, very well-dressed kids. It was a private school. And I thought, you know, these students are going from what I perceive to be an agricultural era into the digital era, maybe skipping the industrial era. Now, I know you have a very idealistic vision. How can young African students make that leap from the traditional agricultural era to the automated coffee time, well, relaxed farming method? There's something very strange going on, and I just can't figure it out, because the emphasis at this Congress seems to be the wonders of technology, not space technology, but technology, medical, everything. However, if you look at the world today, the gap between the rich and the poor is ever widening. And I take my home country of Canada as an example. Those who are at the bottom, they're not improving in their lifestyles.
Okay. So your question.
So perhaps Mr. Hornsby can help me, because I know in a large country like Canada, it takes several days to go from Newfoundland to Vancouver as well, flying low-cost carriers.
Okay, so I'll ask Mr. Malinga and Mr. Hornsby both to respond to these comments.
Okay, the question on whether our young people can actually jump and skip one era, I think that's possible. As an African continent, you know, the advancement of technology has allowed us to leapfrog certain things. The landlines, as an example, there are certain countries and regions in our country which skip that era of a landline. They move straight from nothing to a cell phone. And I believe that even with the challenges that we have, our youth, I can give an example of my child. I think he's more technologically savvy than I am myself. And so we cannot underestimate our youth, but then I think they have a capability and a capacity to really, adapt themselves to the latest things. And so I believe that as a continent, we should not want to, go back and fill in the gaps that we missed. No. We shouldn't do that. We should say, this is where we are, this is where we find ourselves. How do we make the best of it? Thank you.
Mr. Nakaba, would you like to add something to this one?
Thank you very much. It's maybe not directly related, but I will follow on to that. I mean, young people in the continent. I mean, Africa is a population of young people. I'm sure in the stats you will see that in relation to the population in the world of over 6 billion. I mean, where Africa has 1 billion people, and the bulk of the people in the African continent are young. I think that is an opportunity. We see that as an opportunity, basically. And if you look at most of the young people in the continent today have mobile phones. And they use these mobile phones in a very sophisticated way, in the same way that a mobile phone is probably used anywhere in the world, or even better, in fact. They develop their own applications and certain ways of using phones. For instance, one of the most popular social media platform in the African continent, which is rated in the world, is Mixit, which is a company that started here in Cape Town. And this is a short messages which are relatively almost free or next to nothing, highly used today in the continent and has expanded in Asia and other parts of the world. And also through the use of, the same mobile device. I mean, young kids use this, for school and for education, for homework, and there are so many applications. So we call this generation the mobile generation, the digital generation, They are not immigrants in the digital space. They are born in the digital space. So we believe that these are the people who are going to change the future, basically. And they are there, and they use mobile device like anyone else. Just the last comment on my side is to say that, one of the issues to us, I mean, it's linked to mobile phone that I really would like to put a comment on it, is that Africa it's more a telecoms as an application. Africa has this growth in mobile, as Sandile said. I mean, it's something that has surprised many people in the world. And in the recent past, a lot of undersea cables have been built on both sides of the Atlantic and Indian Ocean. As you know, that most satellite players in communications operate in the African continent. But the irony is that we don't have a major teleport or telehouse in Africa that's able to interconnect these undersea cables and satellites. Most of the traffic is still routed out of the African continent. And what we are now planning as Convergence is to build an African teleport that is going to be able to provide a co-location facility for all those who own satellites, whether they are on the Indian or Atlantic Ocean facing the African continent, or those who have space capacity in satellites that are owned by others. Unless we create this intra-Africa teleport or communications ground segment to be able to do this, we still are using the old colonial links to go and route traffic elsewhere while we are communicating within the African continent. So it's very important for those of us who are, for instance, owners of space segment in one form or the other, where you have an interest in the African continent, join us in the building and development of a teleport that is going to address intra-Africa traffic.
Perhaps we need to also share a little bit of experience as we see it in Nigeria. We believe the digital revolution is virtually across the world, and we're having our fair share. in every home, children now dominate operation of basic electronic equipment. It shows that they are also moving along with the rest of the world. And also don't forget that movies which children are exposed to also see what their counterparts are doing across the world. With GSM explosion in Nigeria, we currently have over 95 million GSM lines, and out of which, with a young, vibrant, youth population, a lot of them are linked to it, and are also having a fair share of what is globally happening. It's also in the light of that we recognize the fact that we need a satellite, a communication satellite, with enormous footprint in Africa. And that is exactly what we did with our first communication satellite. And that is also what we have done in the replacement, emphasizing on the fact that we need to be part of the global digital revolution and contribute effectively, not just as observers. And this is exactly what we are doing with the... Yes, and that is exactly what we're also doing in collaboration with our counterparts from South Africa. MTN is all over. We're working together, and then we're also developing other infrastructure to make us properly part of this movement. Thank you.
Now, I was reminding my colleague about Nollywood in Nigeria, which is the second largest movie production house in the world.
I might just add one comment, and it's not specific to the situation in Africa, because I can't claim to have any expertise to be able to address that. But one of the things we find, certainly with what we've been trying to do as a company in terms of launching new technology in marketplace and around the world, is that in many cases you find the greatest resistance from the most developed countries, really, and that's because there are such entrenched ways of doing things that it's very difficult to make them change, basically, or adopt new methods and so on. So, in many cases, it goes back to, I guess, Ms. Malinga's comment. I don't see the need to go back and sort of go through all these steps that other countries may have gone through if you can kind of make that leap forward. I mean, communications is the one that's used as a frequent example here, but I think it applies to a lot of what we're trying to do, certainly within the Earth observation area, and you find the adoption is quicker, frankly, by these countries that don't have some of the infrastructure that was being built up over time.
Is it time for another question?
Yes.
To paraphrase President Kennedy, ask not what satellites can do for Africa, but ask what Africa can do for satellites. And I've not heard that mentioned, that there are tremendous opportunities for satellite control, ground stations, for observations of satellites where owner-operators cannot observe them and improve the precision of their orbits, for reference emitters on the ground to mitigate radio frequency interference. I haven't heard that mentioned by any of the panel members, and I'd like to hear some comments.
Would anyone like to take these? Okay, Mr. Cheney.
Yes, just regarding the interference and the radio frequency, there are technical solutions to solve this kind of problem, and with, let's say, the new kind of payload we are able to do in the telecommunication system, you could reuse the frequency. So it's really a problem, but it's manageable. It's not a so hard topic, I will say. So there are a lot of difficulties for sure, but there are also technical solutions, and we have improved our technical solution to solve this kind of problem. So we will use multi-beam payload. So that's normal. Today it's more or less the new technology that could be used, and that will frees a lot of frequency, a lot of position. I just want to one comment more. You know that today is the anniversary of the launch of Sputnik. Thank you, guys. Just remember that we have it has taken more than 60 years for Europe and North America and Russia and let's say the old country to understand the use of the satellite and to know how to use this kind of satellite. I think it will not take 60 more years for Africa to use it definitely in the best way.
I really hope it doesn't take 60 years and Africa comes along very quickly. Any other question? Yes. Can we have the mic, please? Here in the front. Okay, it's just coming.
Yeah, there is an area of great concern today and become very worrisome, and that is which I expect my colleagues from the African region, especially Nigeria, to mention. And this is an area where the cooperation of the industry will be very important. That is the area of security. And life and properties are getting more threatened daily. And I know that the agencies will want collaboration of the industries in order to mitigate problems in these areas. Thank you.
Okay. Who would like to take that question on security in Africa and what satellites can do?
Yeah, it's a good idea. Certainly, 5 minutes is not enough to say everything. But security issue is a big issue that is of concern to everybody. Those of us at the Space Agency of Nigeria are also looking at that. We believe that we're already talking and working with the appropriate agencies through integrated approach using Earth observation satellites, communication and global positioning system to support the immigration services in border surveillance. That we're also currently doing. And it's also part of our plan to also increase in our fleet synthetic aperture radar, because a substantial part of Nigeria covered with cloud cover. And there's a need to look at beyond that, first to be able to evaluate our oil and gas assets, and also be able to also look at our shorelines. Offshore activities, a lot of illegal fishing activities, vessels that should not be within our territorial waters are there. And we need to also look at that and report on a daily basis to people who should know. That is also part of what we currently do. And also using high resolution for urban surveillance with the appropriate authority. And that has received enough attention in recent time in Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If there is one more question, okay. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Dr. Malinga has bemoaned the unfair contract terms.
Could you please speak a bit louder?
I'm saying Dr. Malinga has bemoaned the unfair contract terms that restrict the widespread dissemination of Earth observation data for the region as such. Is that a lack of coherent policies to address the issue of data dissemination? If so, what efforts and measures are being put into place to address that?
Yeah, for South Africa, we have favorable arrangements. When we procure data, we can distribute it for public use to other government departments and academia. But we believe that our responsibility goes beyond our borders. And so, we want a more regional approach to doing business, to say, in the position that we find ourselves, we want to, work with our neighbor in a better way. And so could we come up, I'm fully aware that, the companies that we deal with, they're commercial. And so they have to look at their bottom line, and that's clear. But then I think there's got to be that kind of understanding that, there's got to be a developmental agenda, as well when we do business. And so it's getting to that understanding that's necessary.
Okay, we'll have one more question that's in the...
Thank you. My question is this, particularly to the African nation space agencies. First of all, if you look at the Asian countries, what they have done within the last 20 years is very, very commendable. I agree that we Africans became relatively recent. So therefore, if you look at what the Asian countries have done, then what are we as Africans, or let me put it this way, what are your strategies for leapfrogging us, for fast-tracking our development or indigenization of the technology such that we are not perpetually consumers, and rather we become producers within the next 10 years? If you can shed some light on your strategy, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, we have that challenge. We look at our trade deficit in terms of high technology is high, and it's increasing. I think in 2005 it was around, in our rands, 40 billion. In 2009, that's around 73 billion, and so it's increasing. Our patent share has decreased by 80% from around 0.1% to 0.02%. Our competitiveness has improved slightly from 50 globally, 54 globally to about 50. So those are the challenges that we face, and we are fully aware of them. And we believe that we have to do the best that we can to develop our own capability, and we are fully aware that we cannot do it alone. We have to partner with other companies outside of the country to do that. And the way we want to do it, within our country we have different models of doing it. One is that of establishing virtual centers of competence, which include partnerships from industry, academia, and R&D institutions. They are working together to solve certain problems. For instance, in the satellite system area, we're looking probably at one that's focusing on sensors, another one probably focusing on satellite buses. There are also discussions on the launching one as well. And those are also open to external companies from overseas to be partners in this. And those will be our engines of developing the R&D that's required to develop our own capabilities and technologies within the country. That's how we are wanting to do it.
Perhaps a little contribution. For the development in Nigeria, certainly I will not be in a position to talk for what has happened in the past. But certainly, for the future, Nigeria has an ambitious program for the year 2020. They intend to become the 20th largest economy. And this the program has been developed for all sectors. In the space science and technology subsector, however, we identified there are several models. One of it is to develop from beginning to the end through research and other areas of development. And others, you just go to buy satellite. But we have identified as model 3 a combination of the two. because our intention is not to reinvent the wheels. There's no point doing what others have already done. Work along with others through partnership and cooperation, and then start whatever you can do now. You work with them and then start your hands and start your own. And we believe that this model is working for us, and certainly every sector of the space programs in Nigeria is very active based on this model, and that is exactly the way we are going. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I ask Mr. Almond to conclude, I'll just have a small question. We have talked about resources all over. We have a model of International Space Station where countries could not afford, so they got together. Europe has this model of Eutelsat and EUMETSAT where they combine all their resources. I have a quick question. Anyone from the African Space Agency can take it. Have you considered a model similar to Europe or ISS where you can all cooperate and have a single system supporting Africa?
Yeah, the ARMC is more or less going to function along those models. So we are going to contribute satellites as different countries and have data shared. Not necessarily that every country has to contribute a satellite. Others could contribute a ground station, others provide resources in terms of personnel, as an example. And so we believe that through that route, we'll be able to achieve what we want to achieve as the African continent.
Okay, so I'm glad there is a model. Okay.
Africa believes we must work along together, and that we have started, like you said, through the African Leadership in Space, and we have jointly established a project which we are doing together, Resource Monitoring Constellation. That is okay for now. The intention is also to encourage all our other colleagues within the states in Africa to work along. We will not encourage a situation where people recommend we should just jump to create an African Space Agency. Believe me, it's not good enough. What we have done, moving at our pace, we'll get there ultimately. And it's in our best interest to do what we are doing at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll now ask Mr. Albon to summarize and conclude the plenary.
Hard to keep the mic down here. I'll go up there. Well, I think the panelists did a great job. Thank you all. Thank you for facilitating. Let's see. Challenges and opportunities. I think 3 categories of challenges I wrote down here. Funding. As in all things space, I think funding is a challenge. Getting the funding that's required to do these projects is always significant, and that came up a lot in the discussion today. Developing the technologies required. For example, the African teleport that was mentioned. So working on some technologies that are required to implement some of the things discussed is a challenge. And finally, partnerships. I had a sense as we were listening of a balance between developing a capability within Africa for a space program indigenous and developing partnerships with countries who have that capability and can provide things. So finding the right balance there seems an important challenge as we move forward. I think there are opportunities in 2 categories. Opportunities associated with the benefits that come from space that can be provided, and opportunities associated with developing space industry itself. And the categories I'm going to mention kind of cross into both of those. First is discovery and benefits. Clearly there are benefits that were discussed of providing data to farmers, telecommunications, data for monitoring the environment, for security, for emergencies, and discovery that comes out of research associated with the space industry. So discovery and benefits are there. Clearly jobs, both from the data and the benefits that are provided by some of the things that we talked about, but also developing a space industry creates jobs. It encourages education, technology is developed, and you kind of get a cycle there around jobs. Opportunities in leadership and collaboration. So opportunities to be leaders in space worldwide, but also opportunities to collaborate. More than just about any industry, space drives us to collaborate internationally, as this Congress represents. And finally, prosperity, or creating new business, both from the services and the data that come from the capabilities provided by space, and also generating a new space industry itself would create new businesses, new economies, and new prosperities. So lots of opportunities on two fronts there. Challenges and opportunities. Good discussion.
So thank you, John. On my side, I would like to thank all the panelists, and in particular our friend Viren Raja, who organized this panel. I would like also to thank the audience, because there are a great number of people, I think that more than last year, and I thank you for the very interesting questions that you asked. So it is time to adjourn this session. Next year we plan to have the same and perhaps another configuration, another format, because the success of this morning encourages us to go one step beyond. Thank you very much.
Go ahead.
Just 1 second, please. I have a short announcement. I would like to make you aware that today is the launch of the World Space Week. This is the 4th of October, and our IF partners, all our member organizations, and the president of the World Space Week Association would like to invite you to enjoy this week together, and also invite your people back home to organize as many events as possible. Thank you.